Welcome, everybody, to another episode of After the Close. Happy expiration. We're in May now. And with me this month is educator and teacher and my aunt, Mary Serpico, or Aunt May, as you are affectionately known. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's great to be with you.
No, I
Good.
appreciate it. I know that you were the very first person to answer the call and actually step up, volunteer, and say, I want to be on the podcast. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, you're very welcome. And that's not the first time that I stepped up to one of your requests.
That is true. It's true. I had that in the back of my head, but do you want to maybe just go ahead and describe what you've previously done?
Well, I think you know more than I do about what your end of the business was, but I know
Sure.
you were recruiting people to do some type of data entry, maybe, or
Yes.
thing for a company that you were with.
Right.
And
Right.
I recently retired at the time. And I said,
Mhm.
well, I'm sitting around doing nothing. I might as well try that.
Why
And
not?
I
Right. Right. Yes, we were.
did.
So both co-founders of my of the old company were have been on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
so so we've stayed in touch. We've done well, and we when we were running that business, we needed people to do data entry for mortgage title rates at the time.
right. I
Basically,
know something to do with mortgages. And it was at the time I think that the real estate market was very volatile. There was a lot going on that
well, yeah. So we'll set the stage. Uh,
Mhm.
so this would have been 2013 that we started, and you probably came on for a brief period in I want to say late 2014. Does that make sense? That sound like it lines up for you?
Right.
Right. So we were building our business where we were building calculators for the Dodd-Frank mortgage compliance rules that had passed in like 2011, 2012, about that time. And so we needed to accrue, which was very manual at the time, all of the rates that individual states would charge for their fees to process mortgage loan applications. And
It's
so
all
we had accrued all of the papers that had all of this stuff, but there was no automation of that sort of thing at the time. So we hired some folk who were interested in helping out to do that manual data entry, and you stepped up. You answered the call then.
uh-huh. That I do. I do remember doing that. And I had totally forgotten about it until recently. It was even after we spoke last time that I said, oh, yeah, I forgot to put that down on my whole profile of all my work experiences.
I definitely didn't forget. I remember I made a note of it because that this had happened, and it was mainly because I know that there are going to be multiple people who see this when it
Hmm.
drops and be like,
Right.
"Ooh, his Aunt May's here!" Like they're gonna want to listen. You have a fan base among some of my old business partners and friends. They remember.
Didn't know that. I knew Jim was a big fan.
Jim is a big fan of you. Yes, Jim loves to get into the inner workings of the clan and what we do.
Right. And it's mutual. I'm also a big fan of his. But another interesting note about that era, I
Hmm.
remember you had a staff party
Yes, you
shortly.
came to the staff party. That's right.
I came and I brought Jessica as a mystery guest. And
Right.
that was the first time I met Katie.
Yes, that was the first time you met my wife, who was at the time I guess, serious girlfriend. We weren't even engaged yet at the time, I don't think.
No, you weren't. It was, I think you were pretty new in the relationship. But yeah, and I remember I met her and I thought, oh, now she's a nice girl.
Oh,
They
well,
make a couple.
yeah.
And
So,
look at
so
you now.
she's hung in there through the long haul so far with all the weirdness that comes with being around me. Um,
Wow.
but yes, that was true. So I remember thinking if I felt actually very exposed when you decided to do it, like come on board and help us. And the reason was because I have always had a very like not work-life balance, but like family profession, you know, like
Yeah.
we we
Uh-huh.
we were not we were not necessarily a family of like it's not like everybody helped at like the business. It's not like we had like a family
Yeah.
restaurant growing up where like everybody had like helped and like the nieces and nephews were the waiters and like the like uncle whatever is doing this. We were not like that. So for you to come on board and be interested with something that we were doing was like a little bit of a anomaly.
Hmm.
I mean,
Well,
at
no,
least that's how I felt. Were you like looking to like just be nosy or what was like your
well, no, I think I was bored.
Oh, well, yeah, that'll do it.
I've been looking for something to do. But with regard to family business, I don't know if you remember the days when I had a learning center. You were,
I I know of it, which I think
Mhm.
we're gonna get to, but I don't have many firsthand memories of it now.
Well, that was 2016 for my
Okay.
50th birthday. Was it 16? No, 2006, never mind. For my 50th birthday, I bought myself a learning center.
As
And
one does when they turn 50.
oh yeah, yeah, and it was fun. And of course, it was focused on math. It was they call the Math Clubhouse, and people
Hmm.
who math math geek students joined it like a club, and they could drop in and whatever. But your brother Patrick was very much involved in my business, and he would
Yes.
spend the time there because he was interested in math. He was in high school at the time, and not only did he like the goings on within the clubhouse, but he used it for service hours that he had to put in when, yeah, for school, like it was like a school project.
Hmm.
And at that same time, Jessica and Erin used to come and they would hang out at different times and we would just have fun. Like on the down times, we would do different fun things.
Sure. So
But
for point of reference to just like we're talking about cousins and my brother. This is all like a family affair at this juncture.
right.
Right.
So there was like a little bit of the family business that was there, but
I guess that's true. I never really thought maybe it's because that wasn't one I was involved with.
right. And you were probably in college by then?
2016?
2006? No, 2006.
Oh, 2006. Yes, I would have been in college at the time. Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
So
I've been away. Right. Right.
you wouldn't be coming to do elementary or middle school math.
No, no, that yeah, I had to wait till I was 36 to bother getting into the elementary school teaching.
Uh-huh.
I was a late bloomer in the family when it came to teaching elementary school.
Right, right. But then you'll have the opportunity to do middle school math in a few years.
It
So
will all come back around. Yes, yes. I mean, here we talk the flagpole banner of Trader Dad's is markets, education, and dad life. So
okay.
I mean, like people kind of wonder why do we talk so much about like education in school? I'd be like, well, because it's important. And I like having teachers on, and I really one of the newfound passions that I've had, I really like teaching my own children things. You know what
Oh
I
yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I really I never knew that I would like that before I had kids. I never anticipated it. But once my kids began to be old enough to be able to follow instruction and just ask questions and whatnot, like I really leaned into that. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy like just explaining things to them and how they work. And I almost think of it as a puzzle where I have to try to calibrate a concept to a level
Uh-huh.
where they'll understand it, you know?
Yeah.
And when I say so, when the masthead says education, it's such a broad idea, but like there's that everyday educating of your kids, and then
Uh-huh.
there's the far more professionalized education of being a teacher or private education, where it means 17 different things.
Right. Oh yeah, it's such a broad field. But now
Right.
as far as teaching your kids, are you teaching them content like academic stuff or like to ride a bike or to brush their teeth or what is it that you're actually teaching them to do?
That's a good question. I so there it's the age is a big factor, right? So we'll take my oldest for example. With her, I have taken an interest in her formal professional, not professional, but she's not the professional, but her
Mhm.
formal schooling and education. I
Right.
keep tabs on that.
Mm-hmm.
For example, she has her spelling word list for the week.
Now, this is first grade.
First grade, she's finishing first grade.
Mm-hmm.
She will, I made a point to ensure that she tells me when she gets new words. We put them on the refrigerator. We're going to go through them the day before the test, make sure she has like, she goes through them with me. Like, I make a point to know that she's like actually
Right.
doing the effort.
Mm-hmm.
With the 3-year-old, it's more about conversation, about just everyday things.
Uh-huh. Right.
And I try to give her the attention and have the patience and really kind of walk her through it, anything that she happens to raise a question about, because 3-year-olds ask the most pure
Mm-hmm.
questions you've ever heard in your life.
Uh-huh.
That's more reactionary. That's what kind of just crosses my plate every day.
Right.
I also make a point to get some of the foundational items done in life, like life lessons. So you mentioned like riding a bike.
Mm-hmm.
My 7-year-old just got a new two-wheeler for her
Right.
birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out there in the cul-de-sac grinding it out for like 5 or 6 Saturdays in a row, trying to get
Right.
her confident enough to do it. Because I'm not going to be the dad who has a kid who can't ride a bike.
Oh no.
No, you can't have that.
Oh no.
But really making those efforts are things that I'm very like attuned to trying to like get them up to speed on, you know? Like I don't want to see them fall behind on these like
Mm-hmm.
incidentals of life that like will pass you by. I don't want them to be 23 and have them be like, you don't know how to ride a bike
Right. Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be,
Right.
just being functional in the world.
Mhm.
So I'm very big on all that stuff.
Yeah. You know, that's a good point that you make, though, because one of the things that I find, everybody has a different measure of intelligence. Like
Hmm.
the kids in first grade who are really smart, you don't know whether they're smart or not, because if they have a good memory, they'll tell you back anything that you already told them. So it
Sure.
takes a few years to figure out like what people's actual measure of intelligence is. But the one thing that's so um, there's such a disparity when you see some kids who have a tremendous bank of knowledge and other kids who are clueless. And it's just those everyday things that we all take for granted, like there's 5 pennies in a nickel,
Hmm.
or um, a camel has a hump, but a bird has feathers,
Right.
or chickens lay eggs. Like all these little simple things that like you never taught them. Nobody ever goes to school and has a formal lesson based upon all those little things that you just pick up is just by being on the earth.
Right.
But some kids pick them up and some kids don't. And when you
Hmm.
see that there are some things that your kids aren't picking up, to be astute enough to have those conversations and say, hey, did you notice this? Did you notice that, the leaves on the trees are a different color today than they were, in July, or like all those little, I don't know, just that general bank of knowledge that we
Right.
all kept with us that we acquire along the way. So,
Mhm. When I was I remember we were talking about like little kids knowledge, but then that continues along and then you'll meet people who are say 20 and they
uh-huh.
have whatever knowledge bank they may have, but whether that's what a 20-year-old should have is a totally different
Right.
point. I remember, and this actually went around Wall Street circles, which is like an interesting kind of uh, combination. there had been a entrance exam to Harvard University
Mm-hmm.
scanned and made its way around Wall Street blog circles because there's a lot of, Harvard MBAs and such that are on Wall Street circles. But the catch was that it was the entrance exam to Harvard from like the 1760s.
Okay.
So it was it was before the Declaration of Independence was signed, like
Mm-hmm.
clearly.
Right.
And you saw what a person who was trying to get into Harvard University at that time was expected to understand and be proficient in.
Mm-hmm.
And the gag of it all was that a person in 2023 or whenever I saw it would never be able to pull all this off
Right.
because it's not knowledge today, which is emphasized.
Right.
An example would be there was a whole portion of it in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Right.
was like the language portion of the Harvard entrance exam
Uh-huh.
under the thought process that they'd probably go into law, I suppose, so they need to know Latin. But Latin is not taught today. It's not emphasized
Right. Or relevant.
or relevant. Relevancy is, I think, the key of it.
Right.
Because I can tell you that nobody in the 1760s would necessarily have a good understanding of, say, the Python computer language,
Correct.
which I think there's a case to be made that
Mm.
someone should know that much more than they know Latin today.
Right. I agree. But that's all evolved. Like when we look back at education in the 1700s, and then where we went to in the 1800s, and then where it progressed to the 1900s, there were all different reasons that people either determined what was important, what should be learned, what should be dropped out of curriculum, and so on. But like Harvard in general, that's what you call an institution of sorting and selecting.
Okay.
And so the criteria that they're going to set is specifically designed to sort and select the exact individuals that they're looking for. So they're going to come up with things that, they only want those few people, like of the number of people who apply, they only want that handful that are actually going to make it in there. And there's something embedded in whatever their entrance requirements are that you'll ask 50 questions, but there are really only two of them that they're
Right.
looking for the correct answers to that they're going to select from.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So
And the
now,
same goes
no, go
in
ahead, go
other. So in other areas, though, how many different majors in college required calculus?
on.
How many people actually ever used it or remember it? But
So,
I went to school with science majors, and they all had to have calculus, and of course the engineering majors, they'll get a little use out of it, but
well,
so many
I
economics.
know what you're driving at, that and I'm like I'm not ready to, but I'm hoping we find an area that we really squarely diverge on in terms of philosophy.
Uh-huh.
But to use like your calculus example and to also use another, say, Wall Street example, options pricing is heavily based on the first and second derivatives of whatever the model is you're trying to do it on.
Okay.
Now, I have never, I have not taken a derivative of an options model to find the delta first
Uh-huh.
derivative. I did that once as a freshman in college and once when I took a financial course in grad school as an elective because I already was in that. Haven't done it since. But the output which the computers
Mm-hmm.
calculate those values for,
Right.
I stare at them every day.
Okay.
Like the when you're pricing a stock option, the first derivative is the delta. It's how much is the price of the option going to change with respect to the underlying price.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The second derivative is called gamma, which is
Right.
the acceleration of that change.
Uh-huh.
I am concerned about the delta value, the gamma value, and then several other Greeks, they're called.
Mm-hmm.
I look at those outputs of the calculation every day.
Okay.
And knowing by intuition what those numbers mean and how they are derived, that is important.
Right.
But yeah, have I taken a derivative? Could I sit and do with a pencil and paper a derivative? Absolutely not. I couldn't do any of it today.
Right.
And I took calculus, I took calculus 2, I applied it, like I did all of that in college.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
once have had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
do handle the outputs of those calculations every single day. So it is
Oh.
good to know kind of where it was, like at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, it is what it is.
Uh-huh.
You were like I alluded to like sort of that full philosophical vibe. Now you actually taught in a classroom
Right.
and you were educated to educate, quote unquote.
Right.
So when one does that, how much of it do you go into the like the classroom knowing that what you're teaching these kids they're never going to use? And what do you think about that?
That's a good question because
Thank
well,
you.
I,
That's why we're here.
as a general education major, K through 8, and I
Hmm.
started initially in fourth grade, and I did that for a few years. And I have to say that what I taught, they pretty much would always have to use because it was very foundational.
Okay.
It was very general knowledge. It was skills, reading, phonics was still part of it,
Hmm.
all the mechanics and those kind of things.
Sure.
Then beyond that, I went to middle school math, and that's where I stayed, which
Hmm.
again, there's not too much there that we don't use. Like everybody does have to have a fundamental understanding of number sense. There are some things in geometry, that,
Sure.
well, we don't really use them too much. I never really understood why we spent so much time doing proofs, but we did.
Sure.
Um, you know, algebra, you do use it, whether they do it formally or not. But like, there's a lot of stuff that I have to say, most of what I chose to teach were things that really did have a certain value. A lot of time, you always get that kid who comes in and says, when are we ever going to use this?
Right.
And I said, well, there are some things, some topics that they wouldn't understand when you're going to use them.
Hmm.
But when you get to a point where you see like systems of equations are everywhere, we're always quantifying two different amounts, and we're looking to see, well, what's the benefit of one way versus the other, or,
Right.
which
Right.
that's where we go. I mean, that's systems of equations. They're always going to be around there for you. So
Hmm.
there's things that I thought pretty much what I was doing was pretty relevant. So if I was in a different content area, I don't know. Or even if I went into higher math to teach that, I don't know how relevant it could always be.
Hmm. And what do you think that the less relevant areas are let's like look at it from like a budget standpoint. Like, should those like electives be like just like, ah, screw it, we're done with art? Like that's a cliche one. Like, where do you
Never.
stand in that sort of thing? Like that,
It's all important.
yeah.
It really is. It's very, very important that on the one hand, you have your average learner. And
Hmm.
again, now my whole life has been middle school. So you have all these middle school kids, and they don't remember too much of what they've already done, and they have no idea what the future is going to hold. They don't really know what they're good at, and they think they like some things more than others, but they really don't know.
Hmm.
So if they are exposed to every content area, literature, science, math, social studies, that's good, because you do want them to have the foundations academically, but where you can really see them become the people that they're meant to be is when you expose them to the arts, whether it's
Hmm.
arts, literary arts, visual arts, where you give them the chance to, create something, like in some kind of a mechanical drawing class or a visual arts program or graphic designs. There's so many of the middle school electives that they offer now.
Hmm.
Really, help kids figure out like what they like to do and what they're good at.
Sure.
And there are a lot of more opportunities for them too as they move forward. There are jobs out there that they can really start preparing for at a younger age. So
That
the
is
exposure is really important.
that is something that I was turned on to recently while I was substituting. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I was substituting in the middle school realm. So
Right.
sixth, seventh, and eighth grade
Uh-huh.
for me. Um, and the eighth grade had a particular day, and I just happened to be there where they went through a whole PowerPoint slide deck by the guidance counselors, and I had to just sit in the back and listen about
Right.
what they should expect moving to the high school level.
Okay.
And lo and behold, I had no idea, but I learned something that day that the particular county which we are in has a heavy emphasis on vocational training.
Mm-hmm.
So there are multiple high schools in the county, and
Right.
different high schools offer heavily curated programs towards either a full certification or an associate's degree or whatever that particular field warrants to show
Mm-hmm.
competency in. And the whole gimmick is that basically a lot of the middle school kids can go to either the high school they're zoned for, or they could make efforts to go to a different high school that had the
Mm-hmm.
particular program they were interested in. And they
Right.
were really pitching it, and they were pitching it on cost. They were saying like you can do this for free versus like
Mm-hmm.
paying like $18,000 to get an associate's degree 5 years from now for the same topics. They were
Mm-hmm.
really pitching it, and they had things as varied as cosmetology, so like being just a beautician. They had but cybersecurity for cloud computing. Like you could be 16 learning cybersecurity and cloud computing if you went to this high school and chose to sign up for this program. That's pretty
Yeah.
impressive, which is not
Mm-hmm.
something I had offered to me when I was
Right.
growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I became aware of all this stuff recently, and I was just like, maybe the world isn't, maybe we're not like so bad, like maybe the educational system isn't so bad as like the news would make it seem. Like they're trying to teach these kids this and that, and like they're really giving them like this is what we're going to need, and this is in like the 2030s, 2040s, like,
Right.
and we're offering it to you. All you have to do is just show up. We are trying to give you all of these skills. I was very impressed with the county's effort to
Mm-hmm.
apply vocational skill sets, which was not something I expected because my generation is very much more in the vein of I had to get my 4 year degree in
Mm-hmm.
something at a professional studies. And to be quite honest, 15 years later, we're seeing AI come in and kind of like, yeah, maybe you're not going to be able to use that so much in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I guess that's my rant of giving my view of what's happening. And like, do you see that as well? Are you
Well,
were you as surprised as I am that there were such vocational outfits? Like, what do you think about that? I was shocked.
all right. First of all, let's put it in perspective. The whole concept of in back in the day, they called it VOTEC.
Hmm.
Okay. And worse than that, in the middle school, you were being Prevo. And if you were in Prevo, well, you were doomed because those VOTEC kids were looked down upon. There was a bias against them. It was determined for them that they really didn't have the skills to do anything. They better just learn how to do something so they could get a job.
And are you talking, what like year
We're
range are we talking for this sort of stuff?
60s, 70s. When I
Okay.
was in elementary school,
Okay.
I didn't go to Catholic school, but that was the situation that my friends in the public school would tell me about,
Okay.
that they would
Got it.
point to kids and say, "Oh, he's in Prevo," and like
Got it.
then
Got it.
you understand, and then years later you come to understand like what people are talking about.
Sure.
But the whole concept of vocational or technical education was given such a bad rap.
Yeah.
And then, like, as you grow older, like my schooling was, I went from Catholic elementary school to Catholic high school to college. So,
Hmm.
like, it was nowhere in my,
I as well. Like we went in principle, we went through the same sort of path.
but then you go on, start living as an adult and an educator
Hmm.
adult, and you start to realize, hey, wait a minute, I need a car mechanic. I need a carpenter. I need a plumber. I need a painter. I need all of these vocationally trained individuals
Right.
to do the things that were never in my skill set or that I never really learned how to do it. I need a chef. I need, you
Yeah.
know, any of the services that are out there. I need a beautician. I need somebody who's going to do my nails. These are all things that it took a long, long time before mindset started to change and people started to realize that, well, first of all, these are people and they do provide a very valuable service
Hmm.
to others. And there's nothing saying that because you're in banking or I'm in education, that the quality of my profession is more valuable than theirs, because we all
Right.
provide values in our own way.
Right.
And
Hmm.
it took a long time, but society started to change. And then education started to change.
Hmm.
And now we're seeing the tables turning, where you're seeing students who are coming out of the elementary schools competing to get into the technical schools.
Hmm.
I'm in a school in Passaic County, and we have Passaic County Tech, and all of our kids really want to go there.
Really?
You know, they have the programs in IT. They have the programs, as you're saying, that you can go through and really come out with a strong background where colleges are really seeking those individual students who really
Right.
have developed a strong skill set, whether it's in technology, whether it's in um, like horticulture, cosmetology. They're not all through the tech that we go to, but for
Some
different
of them,
technology.
right? Like some of the ones that I saw on the list in my county were almost like too specific. Like they had avionics,
Yeah.
which
Mm-hmm.
I had to like Google to make sure I knew what they were talking about. Like they're gonna fix all these different types of, jet engines and such.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can't do
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh. Right.
I give you kind of the inverse example of that. Like I have a bachelor's degree from a good school. I have a
Mm-hmm.
master's degree from another good school, both
Mm-hmm.
in what you could think of as soft technical fields. Like finance is like a business discipline, but it's still like there's some math.
Mm-hmm.
When I was looking for jobs, which I wrote about a few different times on the Substack, the the jobs that were available, which were paying like 15, $20 an hour, like very low wages. I looked
Right.
at it and I was like, shit, I'm not qualified to be a crane operator.
Right. Uh-huh.
Like I need a job, but this job, even though it pays nothing, I can't do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
I feel like really exposes an interesting like arbitrage or mispricing in the world about how certain educations and certain like certifications are so in
Mm-hmm.
demand yet so not in demand at the same time.
Right.
Like if that
Right.
job was paying say $70 an hour, I'd be
Oh,
looking
you'd
at crane operator schools.
uh-huh. Right.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, I think what's even more interesting is we don't know what the demands are going to be in the
Hmm.
next 20. because as you said, AI is going to take over a lot of stuff.
Yes.
There's a lot of fields that can easily be taken over, but
Right.
we don't know what it is that people are actually going to be required to do.
Hmm.
That's why I can understand why the thought leaders or the forward thinkers are out there saying, let's really be specific here so that those who are learning to learn now will be able to adapt to whatever it is they're going to have to do throughout a career.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Personally, the way I have been tackling what I'm already feeling like out there in the world
Mm-hmm.
is a acceptance that I need to be constantly retraining and
Mm-hmm.
constantly having like merit badges to prove it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So like I got an undergrad, and this was at a time when there was still a general belief that college degree guarantees you a job. But then '08 happens and the recession hits, and you kind of realize it's like, oh, well, a master's degree is really what you need to be okay. And I ended up getting a master's degree. Fine. A couple of years later, you realize it's like, well, the world is shifting and these things are in demand, these things are not. So now I've over time gotten different certifications and different things to kind of fine tune myself and to target myself to an area where there is demand. And I'm finding that that cycle is now accelerating, where instead of doing something maybe every 5 years, I kind of have to get something every year now.
Right.
And that's a way to counteract the
Mm-hmm.
swift changes in the skill sets that are needed and in demand. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like things that I was like good at and 5 years ago, that's all well and good, but actually there's not a lot of need for that anymore.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's happening, I think, quicker
Yes.
than it was even a generation or two ago, where that you have to constantly be cycling towards the next thing. Like where I'll
Right.
be, it feels like you're almost swimming. Like in 10 years, I might be in something in a profession that I don't even recognize today.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. Now, the one thing about education is that's embedded within the profession.
Hmm.
Like there's always ongoing training. Like you always have to go to those in-service days. You have to see what the new research is that's out there. You
Yeah,
always
and the
have
kids have their half days and I have to deal with it.
right, but if they didn't,
Yeah,
and then they would be behind because the whole rest of the state would be moving
true,
forward for the new research that
true.
people are working with and the new technologies as well.
Right.
Because there are a lot of things like that just come into play that if we don't provide them to students starting from first grade or as soon as the technology is available, they'll never catch up.
What
You know,
what did you think? You said new technologies. What did you think about the remote learning during COVID from a teacher's perspective? We ranted about it from a parent's perspective, or from a
okay.
teacher's perspective.
I think, well, I can only speak for the school that I was hands-on in,
Hmm.
and I think they did a phenomenal job. I
Really?
mean, very, very little time to plan or
Hmm.
prepare. Like, I think we had maybe a week. And
Sure.
in that week's time, on the administrative end, they redid a schedule for remote learning. First of all, let me backtrack a little bit.
Sure. Sure.
I'm at a school that a few years ago, I don't know how many, they had a grant from, I believe, Samsung, I believe.
Okay.
And, they were able to receive Chromebooks for every student. So all of the kids in our school had Chromebooks. And so they were familiar with that to begin with,
Okay.
which not every school did.
Sure. Sure. Everyone varied for sure.
Remote learning, everybody who went home with a Chromebook, that was a huge learning curve. And it
Okay.
was successful. The communities were then forced to increase, like internet service into homes.
Right. That was a factor.
That was huge. I mean, like that was really a societal change that took place that was a good thing. I mean, that was a really positive thing because
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
the differences between the haves and have-nots is,
Hmm.
you know, to all that. So in that regard, I thought it was great. I thought it
Okay.
was really good. Then getting specific to our school, administration came up with a schedule. We had training where our teachers, if they weren't familiar or comfortable with it, were all of a sudden introduced to Google Classroom and many platforms that they could then go into, and they started designing lessons on a very different level. So what they learned and took away from it was phenomenal. I mean, it was great. And then the lessons that took place was a very different approach. The content was given. Um, I can't say that the students were successful enough in being able to communicate all that they were doing because there was no more writing.
Hmm.
There was no oversight of how they were, they were that formative assessment just wasn't there because you do have to be in person for that.
Hmm.
Did see that when they came back, there were tremendous learning loss studies that were done and things that the students had to catch up with and so on. But I think that there were real values that went into just being able to make that push and to do it so quickly. The
Hmm.
impact that it had on the teachers was fabulous. If they have a whole new bank of resources now that they could use, that they can implement virtual lessons. We've gone on virtual field trips, we've seen virtual dissections, we've seen all kinds of things that they would not have been able to do or probably wouldn't have thought to do if they didn't have to. So like
Okay.
there was an outcome that came from that. So in that regard, I think that there was some real value. My biggest disappointment is
Hmm.
that after it was over, it was like in New Jersey, I can only speak for New Jersey. Um, it wasn't allowed anymore.
So it was
We still,
largely went back to the original.
it was like, yeah,
It was
we're
as
not
if this
doing
was like an anomaly, and now we go back to what we're supposed to
it.
do.
And so now just think of this. If we had a snow day, imagine if we said, well, it's a virtual learning day. It's a remote learning day. Everybody's going to stay home. We wouldn't have to make up those days in June.
Sure.
Imagine those kids. Now we say
So
that
you're are you saying that now in 20 like this past winter you still had snow days, actual snow days, and they weren't virtual learning?
correct. There was a rule there. You had to have so many consecutive days before they would allow you to go remote. But
Why?
that's my question.
Is that
You
like
know,
was there like a baked in like legacy union rule or something like that that required attendance?
no, this came from the State Department of Ed.
Huh.
So I didn't understand that because on the one hand, there were some students who really did better at home.
Okay.
And there are some students who can function better when they're sitting in a remote location, learning from someone on a screen, being left alone to do their own work, to
Hmm.
type opposed to handwrite. It's not every child, and I'm not saying that it's supposed to be for every child, but I don't understand why we can't allow that as an option for the students who would really benefit from it. So there were drawbacks. I will say there were drawbacks to the virtual feel,
Hmm.
to all of that and for the amount of time that it was. But I don't think we should have just eliminated it once the crisis was over. I think we should have really gone back and assessed what part of this do we really want to hold on to? Because there was a lot of good that was embedded in it.
That's interesting. I wasn't really aware that it had been rolled back in certain areas as much as you're making it sound. Because here in North Carolina, it's at least where I am, like my county, and the assumption and the running joke actually is that, oh, kids don't have snow days anymore. I mean, there wasn't a lot of snow in North Carolina to begin with, to be fair,
Right.
which
Uh-huh.
could maybe actually be a factor in why the policies are different. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I always had snow days up in the Northeast, but
Mm.
there's an understanding that like, oh, if there's like a tornado or a hurricane or something of that nature, it's like you're going to immediately go to remote learning.
Mm-hmm.
All of the
Yeah.
kids have their laptops, and as a substitute, honestly, from my perspective, I was supremely disappointed when I started subbing because I've said before, not that I thought I was going to be, Robin Williams in having them stand up on the desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my captain," at the end of my day of subbing,
Right.
but they just get left tasks on their laptops.
Mm-hmm.
So my subbing experience is essentially 5 consecutive periods of study hall
Yes.
from my perspective.
Yeah.
I had a much more enjoyable time being a substitute teacher when the few times I picked up more elementary level kids and I was
Mm-hmm.
given a legitimate lesson to go through that was interactive. Like I was engaged only for the younger kids because they were not yet at that laptop age.
Okay.
When I was in the middle schools, I brought my own laptop to get my own other work done because I knew that
Mm-hmm.
basically I'm just going to nanny kids for 5 periods and they're going to have stuff on their laptops for them to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So I don't know how great that is if the day-to-day learning for the regular teachers was also like that. Like now I'm not really talking about the virtual learning if there's like a snow day, then I'm talking about like the general lessons with laptops in the classroom. And it
Right.
feels like today a lot of schools are becoming a little bit more like tunnel vision. They're all doing stuff in their laptops.
Mm-hmm. No, well, again, I can only say like my experience is there's much more of a balance.
Okay.
You know, there is, you're still going to see direct instruction. Like, and I think in most content areas you will see that. But then again, for students to like say you always have to have a behavioral objective. So at the end of the instructional piece, the students always have to produce something. So
Okay.
if it's work, like in math, there's not too much that you would do with a laptop. Like if you want them to show their work to actually, show how they're going to work out a problem and those things,
You see a lot
they're
of
going to
that.
paper and pencil or some kind of a whiteboard or whatever. But you'll see them do an exit ticket, which is multiple choice. So it's much easier for them to just, pull out their Chromebook and answer that because it goes directly to the teacher. Like, and it goes to a system then that analyzes that data for them. And so
That
then they see, like, well, we had 4 possible answers here. 90% of the class said A, and that was correct, but the 10% all answered C. Let's see where that misconceptions came from.
I
And
see.
then tomorrow we can start over with that again. So,
Mhm. That's
so
I agree
yeah.
with you that like the analytics of it is valuable.
Yes.
I totally see that. I guess what I we were talking about the idea of like, being virtual and being in like basically 21st century, to be honest. I mean, you and I are talking to each other virtually at this very moment
Right.
in a
Mhm.
totally different syntax. I was surprised. I guess what I'm saying is I see a lot of disjointedness happening as a result of the move to virtualness because there are some people who are so pro going in that direction. You are pointing out that like New Jersey is so kind of like regressive.
Mhm.
I'm also interested, like, there is going to be a group of kids now who are coming into the professional world where
Mhm.
their idea of like functioning is just hovered over a laptop. Like their
And
idea of what getting work done means is you're sitting at a laptop doing whatever.
right.
Where that wasn't necessarily true. Like I didn't have a laptop growing up, even though I do work on one all day now.
Mhm.
There's this whole like, are you going to go return to an office or are you working remotely? Like there's all these different disjointednesses I'm seeing now, having gone from having kids at a young age, substitute teaching with kids at a young age, substitute teaching with kids in middle school, being a professional, having like all these different alignments I'm seeing over time. And one of the broad takeaways I'm seeing is like a disjointedness where there's not like a clear answer for how to move forward in how we're going to interact, operate, work, learn, teach. It's this whole
Mhm.
thing that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know where that's going. I think a lot though has to do with the fact that what's the value of the work that's being done?
Hmm.
And is maybe our perception of work, maybe it's time to change that a little bit. Like because historically, well, when I was growing up, work was done Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Hmm.
Grocery stores didn't stay open much beyond 6 o'clock.
Okay.
You know, the barber left. He went home or went upstairs to where he lived over the shop. Like any business, anything that had to be done, it was done within a part of the day.
Sure.
Everybody worked. Like in your families at home, like usually the father worked.
Hmm.
The mother was there to get all those chores done by
Right.
5 o'clock and so on. And so the nature of work has changed completely, like just time wise alone, like where we have 24-hour access to most things 24 hours a day.
Right.
And if not in person, we're allowing for that access virtually.
Yes.
So, we have to think to ourselves, well, how important is it that we do work within these time constraints? And what are the jobs that are really that important that we have to be there in person? And I think the shift is going to be, and it's going to do, again, it's going to be aligned to whatever's going on in society, but the shift is going to be healthcare.
Hmm.
You know, you need people in person, to
Right.
provide health for individuals. Any kind of services, like the services that we want done for us. Like if you have lawn maintenance, well, that has to be done during a certain time. You know,
And
you
it
we
goes back to
probably
vocational items. It sound, like
right.
the toilet has goes on the fritz. You need the guy to come and do that. That's a
Right. So
service that needs to be performed and be done. Yes.
right. So I think what we have to do is start to redefine what is the value of all this work that like people are doing on their laptops, and does it really require that they be somewhere in person to
Hmm.
be doing it? Then that opens itself up to another discussion as to, well, what are they doing in their other time?
Right.
Hopefully they're not just sitting on their laptops playing games or you know shopping or those kind of things, but hopefully they're balancing their lives so that they are getting stimulated physically and mentally in other areas and doing some of the things that are going to be of benefit to society in a more, I don't know, philanthropic sense, if you will, like to be able to do things that are enriching in ways other than work. So,
Yes. 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 The measure of work is an interesting idea, and like economically, people do their PhD theses on things like that, right? Like people are
mhm,
trying to figure out like the ideas of productivity. Like I think in many professional roles today, the idea of being paid per hour is like
mhm,
a legacy thing.
right.
My hourly productivity in like a project manager job is
Mhm,
so irregular.
right.
Like I'll have an hour long call where we get a lot of clarity and decision making done.
Right.
And then I have maybe 3 hours of kind of just milling about checking emails,
Hmm.
waiting for the next meeting.
Right. Yeah.
But they're all charged equally,
Mhm, right.
which doesn't make a lot of sense. So, but there's not like really a better system in play yet to be able to handle that.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
becomes like, what are you gonna do with it? I feel like I can traverse, my universe okay, but and it's like going back to what I said with the kids just sitting on their laptops. I think that they are going to be more attuned to the value they're providing
Mm-hmm.
because they are already being educated in that manner.
Right.
Like they know that they have like a study hall of 75 minutes, but it takes them 20 minutes to do their assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have 45 minutes of just sitting there doing nothing, which is like a staple of like study halls and schools in general. But I think like they're much more why do I have to sit in an office for 8 hours a day from this strange period of time when it's going to be like I need to sit and do something for 45 minutes and then I can go about my day for like an hour.
Right.
Like that's going
Right.
to become much more in play, I think.
Mhm. And I think too, those kids who are sitting there and doing their assignment in 20 minutes and then having all that time to kill, I think what we need to do is start to give them alternatives. You
Hmm.
can't just look out the window like, get your creative juices going. Like, what is
Yeah.
it that you do that's going to be productive, that's going to be fulfilling, that can be, shared with other people, that's going to add some value to the quality of life. Like,
Right.
like to just say, well, for today in our social studies class, you're going to write an answer to this question. And that's all you need to do with regard to social studies.
Yeah. No. It's just it's
Yeah.
nobody really has the answer yet, but everybody agrees that there's a problem, I think there. Like there's a mismatch. Problem, it's not a problem, it's a mismatch.
A problem. It's just a phenomena. It's what we have to deal with. It's what we have to embrace now and say, which direction are we going to take this phenomena in?
Hmm.
And what are we going to do with this, to try to make it work for the masses?
Yes.
Because,
I think so. Look, I think about how I want to guide my kids
hmm
when it comes to their education specifically.
right.
And I think so. So I think you and I, despite the fact that we are of different generations, went through a similar educational path in that we both went to
Mhm.
parochial schools and we went to college and then we went to graduate school.
Right.
My children are not, first of all, we're not going to a parochial school.
Right.
They are in the public education system.
hmm
They will continue to go through it. And we made the decision to put them in like we moved to a good school district
Right.
by
Yeah.
design. Like it was an intent to, that was the
Mhm.
intent. Like we did that by design, that they would be in a good school district and do that. What they'll need to learn over these next 8 to 10 years, I'm very interested in figuring out what that should be. I think it's really tough. And I've had conversations with people about it. And my best, besides the fact that my son's gonna be like the kicker for like an NFL team, that's like we know that's gonna happen. He's gonna be a kicker, so he's set. But like figuring out how to like get them, like what should I like encourage them to do? That's like a question that I'm trying to figure out.
Now, I'm sure North Carolina has their state standards, their
Mhm.
education standards. Like in New Jersey, we have the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. So if you go to the Department of Education website, you can actually see what it is that will be taught in each grade level from pre-K all the way up through 12, and
Mhm.
what's required and what's mandatory in every content area, like each standard, like, they'll count to 10, they'll
Sure.
spell these things, and so on. So if you have access to that, I'm sure they do have it for North Carolina,
I'm sure I could get it. Yes.
and really see what it is that's being taught in each grade level, you can actually intuitively say, I would like to see them do this with that.
Hmm.
Like if you're going to see that, like in the art curriculum, that they're going to learn about certain artists in a particular period, the, I don't know, the Impressionist time.
Sure.
Well, you have that information. You could take them to museums and see it more hands-on. You can develop that. You can have conversations about it, take them, look at picture books and get them to really understand more of it or deeper from what it is that they're being taught in school. If they come home and say that they have a certain interest in it, you can really expand upon that.
Hmm.
But if there are areas that you're really concerned about that you don't want them, you don't want to give the school total control over how
Hmm.
it's being presented. You also will have a heads up because you'll have access to the information, and you can have those pre-teaching conferences with your kids before they
Mm.
go to school or they start that unit of study. And you can ask them very targeted questions when they come home and clarify their misconceptions and guide their thinking in a way that's more compatible to the way you would like them to see things.
Like,
And
offer a counterpoint, offer a counter argument, what have
mhm,
you. Right,
yeah.
right. That that's interesting. I believe you're correct that that information is available even on a week-to-week basis. We get that from the teachers. They're very good about showing what topics they're covering on that particular week.
Hmm.
But that's a little bit more like reactionary where uh like they're going to teach, they're going to have that curriculum.
Hmm.
And like I'm like fine with 98% of what that curriculum is. There's nothing that I'm particularly extreme over one way or another. I'm more thinking about it from a pragmatic standpoint, like if you do the math and you say like, okay, we're 2024 now, in 2044, like it's like you go to where the puck's gonna be, not where it is.
Right.
Like on what trajectory would you want to encourage like kids today to be on if they're going to be in like entering their like adult years professionally? And
Hmm.
I feel like that's a lot harder today than it is like a generation or two ago because of like
Hmm.
that speed of change that I was mentioning before with my own certifications.
Hmm.
Like are they even going to need a job? Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm. I don't know. I think
No one
so.
does.
I
It's tough,
do have
right?
to work.
Yeah.
But again, it's a few years ago, well, quite a number of years, I guess about 20 years ago,
Hmm.
someone said to me that it was actually as part of an interview where they said, we have to start teaching, preparing our kids for jobs that don't even exist yet.
Right.
And then, of course, their question was, how would we do that?
Sure. Yeah, it's like, and go on.
Yeah. And
Right.
again, it was a good question. Nobody really has the answer. Nobody can foresee the future to the point of
Sure.
saying, we have to train them to be able to, I don't know what, but the bottom line is we have to train them to learn to learn. To
Yeah, I agree.
open, to always not be afraid to say, oh, wait, I gotta, I gotta figure this thing out
Yeah.
because the basic knowledge is never going to be enough. Like I always have to know more and I have to see what's coming ahead. Now, I think I said this in like the things I was sending you. When I was in undergraduate,
Hmm.
I was an education major. Well, I started as a math major.
Okay.
What you would do is you would be a math major and then you would minor in education. So you could teach math 7 through 12. And then after a few semesters, I thought, I don't want to do this. And I switched and I was an education major,
Okay.
but minor was in math with a computer science specialization. So this was in 1975.
Which makes
So I
sense
took
because
I
comp
took my
sci was under mathematics at that time.
right.
Right.
Yeah, right. And so I then got into my education classes and I would say to the professors, as soon as they can mass produce the microchip, there'll be computers in every school.
You should walk around saying that to people.
No, no, but like in your education classes, like
Oh,
they would
okay.
talk things like, like what was cutting edge and like the new
Right.
research and all this things, which there wasn't much back in the day.
Hmm.
And so I would say that, like I would say, as soon as they can mass produce a microchip, there'll be computers in every school. And they were livid. That's never going to happen.
Mm.
Boards will never allow that. The expense will be so outrageous it could never happen. And it wasn't so much those issues, but it was a fear, in my opinion, now that I'm looking back at it, an underlying fear that they were afraid they were going to be out of a job.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I thought now, like I look back and I say, like, that's not true. I mean, look at the difference. Not only has it created jobs, I mean, the jobs are more interesting and better, more work is being done,
Right.
and it's allowing people time for more outlets. Like for more creativity, for being able to, like if they're into research in their field, I mean, look at all the access you have to that information, like all the different ways that we can gather and process information and how much more learning can take place.
That is
So it
true.
was, so again, so that's where we are now. It's like we have to look at a field and say, as soon as they can fill in the blank,
Hmm.
there will be fill in the blank. And then figure those things out. But the resistance will always be there. The reluctance will always be there. And the underlying fear is always going to be there. It's just that some people have to take the initiatives to say, we're going to be moving in a direction here and we have to be somewhat ahead of it.
Yes. Yeah. I hear you. I think that was well said. I get it. I mean, I'm on board with that. I mean, we moved like as
Mm-hmm,
part like that was it. That was we left an entire geographic area for
mm-hmm,
reasons that were based on where we felt the winds were really blowing to be
mm-hmm.
successful.
Right.
So we will, but I understand that it's not for everybody. Everybody can't identify that. Everybody can't be willing to do it. And quite frankly, the verdict is still out whether we were right or not.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how the adaptability, I think, of just life needs to
Mm-hmm.
almost be reintegrated into the education of people.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like that gone are those 40 years and a gold watch and a pension at a place, that sort of vibe, where you
Mm-hmm.
learn like your skill set and you just bang away at that for your 40 years. You don't need to like retool every so often. That's
Right.
gone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think if we really think about it, those people really did need to retool. It's just that they didn't. And
Either they didn't understand to, they were too stubborn not to, they didn't,
what
yeah, for whatever reason, they just didn't do it.
and right more times than not, well, we always did it that way.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, you
that's
did it that way, but you didn't move forward, like so those days it's in one regard, it's a good thing they're gone.
all right.
You know,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good way to look at it. That's a
what?
positive note that I think we can kind of start to leave off on because I think we're almost out of time. Time
But
flies
now
when you're having fun.
I just want to say one thing though,
Sure.
especially I have a vested interest in your little one.
Yep.
School is good. The best thing about school is that they can go and they can be the people that they want to be among a group of other kids, like kids that all share common interests, that have some differences, that have all their different personalities that they're bringing into it. But if they can go and enjoy it and every day come home and be happy about it, then they're successful. Like that's the success. You want them to be able to look at school and learning as something that's not a chore, it's not a task, it's nothing to cry about. It's something that they can say, hey, this was good. It was hard. I struggled a little bit, but it was still good, and I can go back and try again tomorrow.
Well, that's
And
can't ask for anything more than that. I think that's the best outlook overall through any of
uh,
it. And you're right.
yeah,
I hope they do feel that way. I don't want them to have that negative, like not in their stomach vibe about any of it.
Right. And especially to, I feel as if like they're not meeting the mark or they're not good enough or they should always be doing better or there's something bigger out there that they have to go from. If they if they do the work that's required of them and they do it well, they're learning an awful lot, and so you want them to do it gracefully. You want them to do it peacefully. You want them to be happy. You want them to be productive citizens. Like after all is said and done, you want them to be able to contribute the best that they can to the society that they're living in to make that better too.
Well said. I agree.
Mhm.
Happy to have
Oh,
that as the closing thoughts on this month's episode.
well, I'm glad I could provide that for you.
Well, great. So, Aunt May, thank you for being here this month. I really appreciate it. I think we should, there's a solid conversation. I think we're both a little surprised at how fast it went and how much we spoke about. So I'd be happy to have you back at some point in a while. We'll figure something out. What's that?
I, yeah, we should take our act on the road.
We'll take
We
our
should
act on the road. Yeah, yeah. We'll start selling premium tickets to just that.
right, and we'll put Jim in charge of that.
We'll put Jim in charge. We don't want to give him a bigger head than he already has on such things. But anyway, so we just say so this is when this goes up, this is gonna be up today's May 17th if you're listening to it on the day it drops. And so don't forget to check out the Substacks, which go every Tuesday. The traderdads.com store is open. Everyone can check that out for some dad hats, some t-shirts, some other swag. Then we also have the podcast and clips going up on YouTube and Instagram. So please like, subscribe, follow, whatever it takes. And any last words before we sign off?
No, just thank you for having me. I think it was really an engaging conversation. It's
Mhm.
gave me the opportunity to think back and think forward at the same time and do a few comparisons of what's going on a few miles south of where I am.
All right. Well, we'll leave it with that. So we'll see everybody next month. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.